Good morning and welcome to the Pimento Business Development Club. The BD Club was set up about 4 years ago, and it's really there to help agencies with all aspects of new business, marketing, and growth. And it's there to give agencies ideas and thinking that will help support their own sort of approaches, what they do. If you don't already know me, I'm Paddy Woods. I'm the founder of Pimento Fuse, which is a new business consultancy that's there to support independent agencies in their marketing and new business growth. If you haven't been on previous calls, please use the chat box to ask questions, and I'll look to bring you in later on into this session. So today's session is really about looking ahead to 2026, and it's going to be exploring the fundamental shifts that are happening in their client roles, client expectations, and whether agencies are actually adequately prepared for these changes. I've got the fabulous Tina Fegent and also equally amazing Simon Moore who have joined me. And I'm not going to do their bios. I'm going to actually ask Simon and Tina to do their own bios for you. So Tina, do you want to jump in and go first?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Nice to see a few familiar faces. Hi, Laura. Hi, Simon. 30 years experience in marketing procurement. I was explaining to my Uber driver this morning, he said, "What do you do?" And I said, "Marketing procurement consultant." And even the old man, I still have to explain that I don't buy pencils. So I had to explain to the Uber driver how I started. And to be fair, he actually got it, which is quite unusual, really. So you're one of the first to do marketing procurement 30 years ago, set up teams in various organisations, spent a couple of years agency side, and for the last 19 and a half years, because I know it's 20 years next June, been running my own consultancy and lucky to work with fabulous people like Simon and his team at Dreams. Pitches, on the speaker circuit, trying to promote what good procurement looks like. And as I'm 60 at Christmas, I'm working on my legacy ideas. So looking at things like marketing procurement awards to try and raise the profile of really good marketing procurement and things like marketing procurement training, looking at that as well. So yeah, fingers in a few pies and obviously been a supporter of Pimento, I think since Stephen started it all those years ago and worked with Paddy all those years ago when he was at his bar as well. So thanks for asking me today.
It's a pleasure running the Compact group. That was fun.
Yeah.
And Simon, thank you as well.
Yeah, hi all. I'm Simon. I'm the media marketing director over here at Dreams. 3 decades of client-side marketing, covering everything from advertising, media planning, in-store, all creative strategy. You name it, I've had a hand in it at some point or another. Obviously, the last few years, much of my focus has been around media and performance agencies and managing partnerships, so Team GB and our activation side of things in that space. So yeah, done lots of things. That's me.
Brilliant.
And a better negotiator than me, I have
Yeah.
to say as well.
Yes, the
I
conversation
try.
we had about negotiations with cars and everything.
Yeah, Windows.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, thank you both for being here. It's really great. We've got a really interesting session ahead of us. So I'm just going to get started. I'm going to come to you, Simon, first and talk about sort of 2026 and looking ahead. What do you see as the biggest shifts in your expectations from agencies? And do you feel that agencies are prepared for it?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one because yesterday we had our, I think it's second or third round of budget prep for 26. As you can imagine, numbers are always being squeezed, and marketing's always one of those areas that has to sort of pick it up. But one of the biggest buzzwords in that meeting, and has been for quite some time, is all around AI. Is in everything that we're doing. And that means now that we're putting more pressure onto our agencies where we don't necessarily have the major skill set internally for some of these bits. We are reliant on our agency network um, in helping us to navigate a lot of this. And, it's not just about using AI to generate an image or using AI to generate copy, which, we can quite happily do internally, and we do internally. But it's the bigger landscape pieces like search, for example, Google Mode that came out a few weeks back. That actively changes how people search. If you talk to the younger generations, it's chat GTP and they're searching their function there. That takes the traditional search model out of the way, which means that how businesses have been set up in the past with SEO completely changed that navigation. It's all about rich content. It's all about reviews and accreditations and all of those other bits and pieces. So for me, one of the things that agencies really need to get under the skin on is that AI aspect and be those experts. But it's not just about being narrow focused. It's about having a much broader mix and understanding that AI and its implications in, yes, it can be more efficient at helping you develop pieces of material, but it's how it's going to work in the wider space and what those opportunities are. So therefore, you've got to have the skill set, you've got to have the resource, and you've got to be at the forefront of it.
Fantastic, thank you. And Tina, is there anything else around sort of that? And actually, in this question you probably haven't prepared for, but how is AI in sort of getting involved in sort of the work you do in the marketing procurement landscape as well?
Yeah, I mean, all agencies say that procurement are using it as a tool to sort of like knock their fees down. But I think, there is a greater demand for it. And actually, agencies are much more ahead on AI than the clients are. Some clients I think Simon's much more ahead than a lot of other clients I deal with. I've got one B2B client that doesn't use AI at all, and they're a B2B insurance company, and they haven't even thought about, agentic AI. So I think agencies are well ahead on the AI front. So I think clients will be looking, I think, in 2026 about where that fits in. I've got a couple of points later in the question, Paddy, about the role of agencies. There was a great line that I used a while ago that agencies, have to, AI and allow agencies to be more creative, more collaborators, and also quality checkers. But also a word of warning because, don't big up what you haven't got on AI, because when I did ProcureCon earlier in the year, there was one, it was a bank, and she said they were doing audits on agencies to say, we're going to achieve these efficiencies with AI, and they actually audited them and it was a lie. So that's the first time I've heard of it. So I think, be realistic, but you are ahead, agencies are well ahead of clients in their use of AI. And it's like everyone that says when Excel came out, accountants were, we're going to lose our jobs. That's not the case. But as Simon said, I've even got my old man using ChatGPT to buy a crossbow, which worries me because why does he want a crossbow? But those that know my partner understand why. But he's using it. He's starting. So not just the young kids. So I think things like data and efficiencies and production and stuff like that. But you need that human judgment part as well,
I
which is
think
what is a great role for agencies.
that's a really important part. I mean, there is when AI was first sort of driven as a cost efficiency piece and, can take resource out of this, and you always hear the articles that, oh, such and such is reducing headcount. To be honest, I've not come across any of that in real world when we're doing stuff, but it is really the opportunities. So within Facebook or other platforms, how the AI brings you into reaching those audiences and how it can be generative in terms of the creative and the execution, I suppose, is more where I see much more of the benefit coming from. Yes, there are admin benefits, but sometimes currently, whether you're using Microsoft's platform, you could spend twice as long just trying to navigate your way through it than it produces. So there is huge opportunity, and I think that in the next few years, yeah, it's going to transform because kids are already in that space, and that's how they're searching now.
I know it's my daughters use it for everything, including cheating in their homework.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say that. Tina, so coming back to you, so what is the common agency mistakes that you're seeing that they're repeatedly making, but it's also going to become much more costly for them next year?
I think the main one for me is failure to understand clients' business models and the internal politics. I see it time and time again. The agencies go with what they think the client wants, and I think Simon will know that from his experience in pitches and stuff like that. You know, we don't use the term partners lightly. It's not a term that procurement likes to use. But I think, the good agencies, the ones that are the partners that do understand where the client is going, where the business, what are they looking for? Companies that have merged or companies that are going through rationalisation. We were just talking about Pret, being hit with, their figures aren't that great. Come with those solutions. So I think the first one is failure to understand client's business model and the internal politics as well. So working with Simon Mintart, who's on this call, big shout out for our Advertising Who Cares project. That's okay. We've got a survey. Those of you who follow me on LinkedIn, someone asked me to do a shout out, but we've been doing a survey about, and Simon, Simon Moore, kindly contributed to an in-depth interview about the importance of relationships as the workshop stream we're looking at. We've had a really, really low response on the online survey, I think 200 people. But the insight that Simon Moore gave us and other people we've interviewed is just showing the value of relationships. But that relationships has many views. So I do think the internal politics is something that agencies need to be better of. Obviously, from a procurement point of view, it is about transparency, and I know some procurement people have gone perhaps too far on transparency and what's your overhead and what's the cost of the Christmas party. But really, having understanding what that transparency is in terms of pricing, process, and results as well. Because actually, Simon's not going to spend money if stuff's not working. So having that, and then the third thing would be, and if you talk to, Nick, who runs the sourcing group at ISBAR, it's about diversity. And, I'm quite a big fan of that. I'm working on a massive public procurement process. And I feel sorry for anybody who works in public sector because it's my first experience in 30 years of working in public procurement. Oh my goodness, why use one word when you can use 1,000? And this is the big Ofwat campaign that when you get told to turn your tax off next year, that's what I've worked on. But really, what's good about the public procurement process is that diversity, really looking at encouraging and being open to all agencies and the makeup of that. And I do think I'm hoping we're going to see more of that next year in terms of that diversity of talent, North versus South, women, women-owned businesses, that, only 5% of women businesses get PE backing, for example. So I'm hoping that we'll see more sort of diversity and upskilling teams. So I think that's the three things that I would say for next year.
Brilliant. And actually, on that diversity side of things, I know that it's been sorry, I'm getting feedback, but pushback on from Trump in America, and so is there difference sort of across the I suppose the Atlantic? Is there difference in behaviours around diversity and within agencies and clients?
When the States, it was always diversity, and in Europe, it was always about ESG. But what Nick at ISBO is saying, he's actually seeing, it's obviously died down quite a lot in the States, but in the UK, he's actually seeing diversity and making sure you've got that diversity. And you do see it. I was at a conference on Thursday about agentic AI and procurement. It was quite boring for me from a marketing point of view, but the panel was 5 white guys. It's like, hey guys, where's the diversity? So yeah, I think we are in the UK market, we are seeing it probably overtake sustainability, which I'm surprised about because it was always sustainability, especially with our net zero goals for 2050 that we've all got to work towards. So for me, it's nice to have both of those, to be honest. It's still only 5% of a scoring sheet, but I'm hoping next year that both will rise up, really.
Brilliant, thank you. And Simon, coming to you in terms of actually the internal client marketing teams, and we always hear about this sort of conversation between in-housing, outsourcing, and stuff like that. So, how are internal marketing teams evolving at the moment, and what does that actually mean for the agency client relationships?
Yeah, well, I think just to follow up on the point in that question that Tina made about relationships are absolutely critical between agency and client. Over at Dreams, we've got some agencies we've worked with for 15 years plus, and others are 8, 9, 10 years. We have very long-standing relationships. And to the point that most of our agencies have a direct open relationship with the exec board as well, because they're hugely trusted. If you can develop those relationships, it is paramount to success, I think. But in terms of adding to that, from a client side, cost the last couple of years has been a huge factor in any business, and every business. One of the things referenced Tina's negotiation points, I find myself constantly battling to take more money out. Yesterday on the budget, take more money out. You have to be creative in terms of where you're going to take money, because the reality is you can't cut agencies from the roster because you're not going to get the headcount to bring some of that resource back in. So you have to just be creative. And one of the things that I suppose a client, it does expect more from an agency, and this is where the trust part comes in. You share a problem and you expect a response, but we are expecting agencies to do more. So you might have paid a flat retainer, and got so much from it. Now, the reality is, well, everything else has gone up by 10, 20%, therefore your output has to go up by the same amount. Things have become more challenging. You know, we talked about AI, but the reality is that's added more workload onto everyone's roles, because now you've got to do an AI piece and you've got to do traditional and all the other various bits that go into it. You know, the media landscape is changing. Only 18 months ago, there was no such thing as subscription VOD advertising. Now you've got to do ads for that. And then within YouTube, you've got multiple tiers of ads. So we are expecting agencies to do a lot more. And that might not necessarily come in just the form of physical output, but it could be being more strategically contributing, or it could be administrative support. You know, oh, okay, we'll work out a plan for that and we'll come up with that. Taking on some of the ownership between cross-agency partners, I think that's hugely important, and particularly for me, where it does become really resource constrained. If we're doing a bigger project, we'll encourage all our agencies to work together, and we'll appoint one lead agency and say, right, will you coordinate with everyone? You don't need to check in with us, just come back when you're all done. So it's a huge help, because it means that they do all the heavy lifting, and actually it brings it all back in together, and then we're all aligned when we come to deliver a project. You know, so it is about the agencies being realistic in the current times, I think, and understanding the pressures. It's not just about coming up with a great idea and then slapping a big price on it. It's about being realistic to where we're all at.
Brilliant, thank you. And Tina, just actually moving on that, we talked about marketing budgets a couple of times, but how do you see marketing budgets evolving, and so where do you feel the priorities are going to be sort of next year?
I think, you know, leading on from Simon, and sorry for everyone on the call, I do think budgets will remain under pressure. You know, we're all seeing it, aren't we, in terms of, you know, the cost of living, except if you're a tube driver, but obviously, you know, but we're seeing it. So I do think there is pressure in all sectors and all clients that I've worked with, in terms of that more for less, you know, that we keep saying in terms of that. But I think, you know, I do want the focus, and I think the focus should be on that, you know, effectiveness. And Simon's really good at that in terms of looking at the media side of things. Is, you know, if I see another creds deck where, you know, blah blah blah, this is great work, as Simon said, a creative idea. Okay, so what results did it deliver? You know, and time and time and time again, I see creds decks that don't have that. And I know it can be really tricky, you know, to get that data from clients. But you know, I do really think that whilst, you know, it's more for less, I think it is looking at that effectiveness and not just efficiencies. I do think that spend will shift towards digital first, you know, and we're seeing that, aren't we? You know, is it P&G or Unilever saying that 50% of their spend is going to go sort of on the influencers? And there's another article that I'm not sure, I don't know, I shared it with Tina Tells, but I was looking at it for last week for Tina Tells on LinkedIn, which was the fees of influencers are going up based on that, because they're in more demand. So I do think, you know, it's very much, you know, the spend is obviously going on the digital side, and that is linked to the measurement, because you can see those results. It's not like doing a TV ad and then the sun shines in your ice cream manufacturer and you sell more ice cream, you know. And I think, like Simon said, on the AI side, the fact that, you know, from his daughter through to my 62-year-old, you know, old man, you know, looking at where to buy stuff, you know. When I was in New York in April, you know, we just saw a demonstration from one agency. They were getting they wanted clothes for their daughter's prom, and actually using ChatGPT was then coming up with, okay, these are the outfits we think are suitable, and here's where you think you should buy them. You know, and I'm just looking at updating my website, and I've said to my guy, you know, as I start to wind down, look at my legacy, you know, but make sure it's AI sort of enabled. So I do think that e-commerce enablement as well, and the customer experience. And I think that might be an article I did share, I think, about the whole, how much that customer experience is. So, and I think from procurement point of view, is I think we will start to see next year, and we start to see those conversations with AI, you know, is where does AI fit in? Is it about the lowering the cost, or is it actually output based? You know, and it's something that someone like Caroline Johnson's been obviously talking about for quite a while. And to be fair, I've always been quite anti it, but actually I can see the value of it. And I asked WPP at a meeting in New York in April, hey, how they're charging AI, and it was, you know, they just fudged the answer, because it's basically fixed fee, commission, or license? And basically, someone said to me, they just don't bloody know. So I do think next year we will see, with the role of AI, agencies and clients finding their feet about, as Simon said, is it about driving that lowest cost, but actually it's not, it's about driving that efficiency and actually utilising the money we've got to create great work that drive the results. So I think under pressure, but looking at efficiency, what's the role of AI, and then how does that affect the remuneration process?
I'm going to throw another question in here, which is around the commercial models then, because actually we need to look at different ways. So it's not about sort of charging by the hour, by the day, but how do we start to think about and what are the commercial models that could be of really interest to clients sort of moving forward with how they incorporate AI?
Yeah, I mean, I think, procurement, we don't help ourselves because we do an Excel spreadsheet and say fill it in, with that hourly rate. And I think, my advice to agencies would be is to go back and say, actually, have you thought of X? Can we offer an alternative? There's no Tina, there is no alternative, as Margaret Thatcher used to say. So I do think, where it's procurement led, and a lot of people might not deal with procurement, but if there is procurement and it is a Excel sheet, push back and say, actually, the world's moved on. In one way, we want to look at a different model, and we want to look at output base. And I contributed to the IPA recent paper that Creative Salon did on remuneration models. When I had the call with Jez and Lee, I actually went on to ChatGPT. I know most models, I think there's 12 or something on the IPA guide. And it came up with some new ones I hadn't heard of, like subscription services and stuff like that. So yeah, I think, be a bit creative within the realms of where you can be creative, because say we do put you in a box. But if you've got someone like Simon who's very enlightened and will listen to it, I'm sure Simon will pick that up. It's if you can prove it, I suppose, Simon, isn't it? If you've got the
Yeah,
justification, then you're
I
open
think
to it.
I think that's the key. It's not just because it's new tech, therefore you can add a new fee onto it. It's about looking at its efficiency and what it does. I mean, in a slightly different context, I mean, I constantly battle with media agencies when we're looking at our return on some of the channels. And when you look at subscription VOD or broadcast VOD, whatever the channel, you look at some of the costs to access that, and then you look at the return, and their argument is, well, it's great for reach and it drives really good, efficient reach. But if it's so costly to do so, then why bother? So I think this is the key point to agencies. It's almost like, yeah, it might be an amazing idea, but if the cost isn't commercially stackable, then there's no point in doing it because it just won't work.
I think, yeah, I agree. I think Amazon DSP, that it's minimum £5 million or something to invest into it or something ridiculous.
Yeah, and unless you've got super budgets, you
Yeah.
just can't play in that space. So many times the idea is, it's like we were talking about pause ads the other week, a really great idea. But then I started thinking about it because I started seeing it, thinking, well, actually, if I pause the ad, I've normally left the room or I've done whatever. But yet the cost of accessing those pause ads is greater than the traditional TV spots. So then you start to think, well, why would I pay two, three times as much? Whereas potentially less attention. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. I think we were watching Amazon yesterday and I think there was an ad every 5 minutes. It was like, oh, doing my head in. Handmaid's Tale is brilliant. Simon, coming back to you. So in terms
Mm.
of capabilities, we talked about AI a little bit, but actually, or quite a lot. But what do you think is non-negotiable for agencies to master in the next 18 months?
I do think, and this will depend on the agency in question and what their role is. But really, we've touched on AI. It has to be AI understanding, and that will require a broader set of skills. So it's not just pigeonholing it into one area, but it's understanding what that AI also does for effectiveness and efficiency. It's about understanding where those broader benefits can come and what and how it can enhance things. But I think, yeah, all agencies really need to be fully up to speed on it and be actually the leading force, and sort out the wheat from chaff really, because some of the stuff is going to be pointless, and it will just be a costly exercise. Whereas there'll be certain things in there are actually absolute gems that you've got to have. And yeah, that's where I'd put the focus.
Brilliant, thank you. And final question before I open up for the floor to the floor. It's a sort of broad question around pitching and onboarding.
Mm.
And I know that you've recently been involved in a pitch process. So what would be great is to talk about the pitch process itself. What are the key
Yeah.
things you're looking for when you run a pitch? common mistakes you see from agencies, and actually expectations in that onboarding process?
Yeah. So I could
Good question. So
actually talk about this for hours. Um, and Tina knows that I love a good pitch. Um, I think really to start with, I think whenever I do a pitch, I put everything into it. It's not just there's a document, come back when you're ready. I put heart and soul into this. And the team, we obviously I seen a question pop up earlier about NDAs and stuff that yeah, every agency that's in the pitch has an NDA. Um, that's the starting point. But it really starts with us doing a long list. So, in talking about our last creative agency pitch, um, I touched base with Tina and I'd thrown over a few agencies I thought about. I talked to a lot of people and I asked for a lot of recommendations and tried to do our last pitch slightly differently rather than going down the various publications and looking at the big 10, 20 agencies and thinking who's the winners, who's the losers. No, this asked for recommendations. So we went to our entire network of people we work with, and they all submitted 2 or 3 agencies that they work with that they would endorse. From that list, that's the long list. We then start to look at, okay, let's shorten that into half a dozen. Um, and that could be location and accessibility in some cases, although digitally now it's much easier. But there's also things like anti-competitive situations and really what the agency's capabilities and some specialisms are. Once we get into the shortlist, it's always in our case, it's right, let's have a meet and greet, a cup of coffee, see where they're at, ask them just to demonstrate their capabilities, and we'll give you a brief outline of what we're looking for. So it's total transparency. I think that clients fail in many, many pitch situations, but partly because the agencies don't ask. But what it is clients need to be 100% transparent in a pitch. They need to share as much as possible. And that could be market data, business performance data, past learnings, problems, what you've done before, everything. But then it is equally on the agency to ask those questions if it's not forthcoming. I think in our case, we open up our network of all our agency partners and we share those contact details or key contacts with any agencies pitching and say, happily speak to these people. These people are always briefed to be 100% transparent and say it as it is. If they think we're hard to work with, we're horrible or lovely or whatever it is, share it all. Because we want anyone we're going to work with, we see everyone as a partner, as part of us, and we want to be 100% transparent so they know who they're going to be working with and what it's really going to be like. But equally, on the same time, we expect agencies to be 100% transparent and honest. There's been many a times I've sat in pitches and it started out like this, and there's 6 weeks of work or 2 months, however long it is, and you've been very clear up front about budgets and scope of work and expectations, and you've put out a budget in there, and you turn up to the pitch, and it's always the last slide on every agency deck because they want to wow you with the creative and strategic thinking, and then finally they get to the cost, but then they sort of always, yeah, we'll move on. You can read that in your own time. That's always the situation. But the reality is, in so many of those cases, it doesn't even match what was first asked. You said it's £1 million, they're coming in at £3 million. Well, reality is you could save yourself a lot of work and everyone else a lot of work by being honest and upfront. In those first conversations, if I said to you it's £1 million and we want X, Y, Z, you need time to go away, think through it, and say, actually, yeah, we can do that, or no, don't chance it and come back with something you can't deliver. Don't come back with a creative idea. Um, I remember some years ago, they shall remain nameless. We had a agency that pitched out this amazing idea, and it was brilliant. Ryan Gosling was going to be on the front of one of our ads, and it was all affordable within the budget we had. No chance. It was about 20 times when it came to deliver. They couldn't even deliver on their pitch idea because the costs were like 20 times higher than what it was first thought. That's an absolute no-no. Don't over deliver and also you know what I mean.
Under
Don't
over promise,
That's it.
under
Over
deliver.
promise, under deliver. I couldn't remember the term then. Always be really, really open and honest in that. And I suppose when we get into the absolute final process, we've given the agency all our time, you know, for all the chemistry sessions, the various check-ins, scopes of works, the budgets. We then create a scorecard. That scorecard is shared with agencies right at the start, so everyone knows how are they going to be scored and who will be scoring them. So if there's 3 people involved in the pitch, 3 people will be scoring. We even ask our agencies that they've spoken to score them and give us an out of 10 score on their experience with them. I.e., did you ask the right questions? How proactive with you? When I gave you those details, did you leave it until a day before the pitch to contact them, or were you on it straight away? Because to me, an agency that's really touched base right at the end says they're not very proactive and they're not actually going out there to understand what you as a business is about. You know, who internally have you spoken to? I'll ask all of these people for a little written review, a small paragraph. We then score and we'll weight pieces. So it might be a creative agency, but it doesn't mean to say that 90% of the pitch is done on creative. It could be 40% on strategy, 30% on creative, 10% on chemistry, or however it works out. But that's the scorecard that's developed and everyone scores. And at the end of it, it becomes no longer subjective. You've got a very objective viewpoint. And it is very important because when you have a number of people in a business, all with different views, you rely heavily on a scorecard. And we want to be absolutely fair, honest, and transparent and say, actually, do you know what? They did win it. In one of our situations, our CMO had a very different output from everyone else in the team. The team won because of the basis of the scorecards. So it is absolutely vital. But I think it's really, if I was, you know, at the end of any pitch, whether you're successful or unsuccessful, there always needs to be feedback and it needs to be constructive. I've spent post pitches probably another day on calls with anyone that's unsuccessful and giving them really good feedback as to what's wrong. But what I would also say to the agency is if you are unsuccessful, don't keep hanging around like an ex-girlfriend or whatever, you know, accept it. It hasn't worked out. Don't keep trying to change our attitudes or our opinions because actually that starts to become judgmental in terms of why you're giving you feedback, why. So it just won't happen. But it is ultimately in any pitch, it's about 100% transparency. It's about being really, really honest and sharing where you're at because you can't do the amazing work if the client doesn't give it to you.
Simon, thank you very much. Tina, actually, just one of the things, feedback, really hard for agencies to get
Yeah.
back because a lot of clients, you came a close second, always that sort of thing. And how can you help or recommend approaching to getting the right feedback so you can really learn from it?
I know, and it's a you know quite a common issue I think with agencies, and it is appalling. And I think some clients don't appreciate the time and effort that has gone into doing a pitch, and procurement give a three line thing because they weren't really involved in the process and stuff like that. So I know it's really really difficult, but like Simon says, is you got to get the timing right. You don't want to be sort of hanging around. You do want that feedback, and they should be respectful, and it should be. If they've done a good process like Simon's done, and Simon's score sheet even has little cups on it of first, second, and third. Don't you, Simon? Which I do like that Laura showed me. So I think, if you dealt with both procurement, and I appreciate some agencies are just dealing directly with perhaps with the marketing stakeholder, is obviously try both where you've got those points of contact. And it is poor, but try and obviously get that feedback within the first week, 10 days, whilst it's and if they're like Simon and they have done a scorecard and people have filled that in, it is there. And that's one thing I've learned from this public procurement process is being very thorough in terms of when they do the moderation. And because they're so scared of challenges and freedom of information. But it actually is a very good discipline to say, why did you score that, for example? And I just back up what Simon said. For me, it's that having that clarity clarity, in terms of both sides, having that honesty. I always admire agencies that say no when they know a brief isn't right for them. Don't start a process. I did the big iron brew and Rubicon pitch last year. Great, and there's an outcry about, moved away from Leith after 30 years. But, it was great that we were, really honest with all the agencies at the start. And there was one that wasn't, a great chemistry session. Oh, we have a conflict, but it's going to go away. Client loved them. They did loads of work on it. Actually, it's for the Rubicon part. And then they pulled out and they got the client's expectations up. So I think it's better to be honest and have those conversations and say, well, what do you think? We've got this other opportunity, we've got a conflict. And what they say is, two conflicts an issue, three, you're an expert. So for me, a good pitch process is about clarity from both sides, about honesty from both sides. And it is about chemistry, with procurement, but it is about people buy from people. And I think, like Simon said, it is more common. I know there's 60 intermediaries with their various business models out there in the marketplace, but the way that Simon's done that, and I work with Simon on other different projects, and we've gone to some big lists, or we've asked other people. Those recommendations do really work. So I think, ask for the feedback. Don't keep going on about it, because it is unfortunate. It's not a very nice part of the process when you don't get it and you get ghosted. We've all been there and done that. But ask a few times, ask the various people that you dealt with, but decide, like Simon said, at a certain point where, okay, it's bad, but we need to call it really.
It's
Brilliant.
an interesting, just to add to that, when our feedback process on our last creative pitch, one of those agencies, we'd obviously shared a scorecard from weightings and stuff like that. And where they'd done their pitch, it was, the creative idea was absolute genius and was brilliant. But what they lacked was to acknowledge that 40% of that process was on strategy. And that was seriously lacking from that output. Whereas the conversations in the run-up, you actually thought, God, these guys are really on it. But you then do the final judgment really on that day. So it does come into it. And, it is very, very, and, they took the feedback really good. When we said you just lacked, your strategic piece was really woeful. And I think it's very, very important that clients do share that, because everyone else wants to get better for the next time round.
What about the onboarding, Paddy? Because I know Simon's got a good view about the onboarding,
Yeah, I was
wasn't it?
going to
'Cause
ask.
that's quite a key thing, isn't it?
It was actually one of the pitch process, but actually a lot of relationships then fall down with that onboarding process.
Yeah. So where we come to on onboarding, and this is right. So I tell you what we did, and we've done this every time. So we have, as a business, we've got manufacturing, distribution, stores, and all of those sort of bits and pieces. Throughout the process, and we do some of this in the pitch, we give them access if they want to go out on the vans with the delivery driver, if they want to consult in stores, or go to the factory and do a tour of the factory. So we do all of this stuff. When they've started working on the business, we do insist that they have an active involvement in some of this, because they can't really do it justice if they don't actually know how the product gets from A to B and all of those bits. So we obviously we've fed them every piece of information. They probably have more information than any of some of our employees have. But the agencies have all of that. We then make sure that there is huge network cross-agency gatherings, and all projects are shared and aligned and debriefed. Any onboarding agency is debriefed. Once an agency has started with us, we acknowledge, and this should be factored into any costing structure you've got, that probably the first 6 weeks, you might be doing double the output that you will be in the months that follow, because you're trying to onboard. So build all that into your overall cost models, but then also be willing to say, okay, we've won the pitch. That's only one part of the journey. Now you've got to deliver. So be really open to accept any opportunity to come on board and to meet with more agencies, and to actually be proactive yourself. You don't need hand holding.
Yeah, I think from an onboarding point of view, I think it's the governance. And I love, years and years ago, a media agency, I think it was Orange, the 100-day transition plan. And I've loved that ever since. and it doesn't have to be a lot. And in the public procurement process, we've done actually we scored agencies that put that, it can be half a page or a page, but just to think about, like Simon said, to sort of pick that up in terms of, okay, this is how we're going to sort of, get on. And it is some of the boring stuff, like from a procurement point of view, supply setup and sort of stuff like that. But I think it's always good to think about in the pitch process about the onboarding and the governance side of things. Because both parties want to get going straight away, and you do need things like the purchase orders and stuff like that if you're committing to spend. So how that process works.
Brilliant. Thank you. I'm going to start bringing some questions in because there's quite a lot in the chat. So, Tim, I'm going to come to Tim Perry. I'm going to come to you first. If you could just unmute yourself, and actually, rather than me asking questions, I just like people to ask. It just gives a bit of a different direction as well. Hi, Tim.
Hello, just unmuting and starting my video. Can you see me now? Hear me okay?
We can see. Yeah,
Yep,
we can see you.
Great. So the question related to AI, and I was wondering whether either of you are seeing clients raise concerns around confidentiality, security, and ownership of IP issues that relate to AI. And are you seeing that creep into client contracts, service agreements yet?
I am, or we are. We have an information governance group set up, which I sit on here at Dreams. Any use of AI has to be approved by that group. We have AI terms in our contracts and use of information. The way that we see, obviously, once you put it into a large language model, it's out there in the public. So there are the normal sensitivities that you would have around confidential information, and those requirements, they've been reworded in contracts to imply or explicitly imply that AI is considered within that once it's out there, it's out. So yeah, it is making its way in. How it'll evolve in the next few months, 6 months, remains to be seen.
Yeah, I'm the same, Tim. I've literally the last 6, 8 months, clients is coming up, and unprompted by me usually, actually, that the legal teams are putting it in as a clause about, being clear about the use of AI, because obviously there's privacy, as Simon said, and ethical issues as well. So I do think agencies are ahead, though. I do think the level of investment and the usage of AI is more prevalent in agencies than clients. So I think clients are behind agencies, but I'm definitely seeing it from a legal point of view. I've just referred to what I said earlier about this procurement person working at a bank said, they are starting to do these AI audits. Agencies pretending to be further ahead than they are. I'm not seeing that as a clause, but just, be careful of that sort of, if that starts to come up in terms of, you said you can achieve efficiencies by using AI, then going out and auditing that, I think that's quite tough. So yeah, but yeah, definitely the last 6 to 8 months, I'm starting to see it.
I see a tension there because there's pressure on agencies to use AI for efficiency purposes, both from clients and internally to maintain margin. But yes, it does come with that risk of security, IP ownership, confidentiality. So it's a tricky balance, especially if there's pressure from a client on agencies to use AI. And then yes, there are those clauses in the contract that then may or may not be onerous.
And I think that, to your point, that many software platforms like Adobe or whatever will have AI generative capability within it, and you can't get around it. It's almost impossible.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Tim, thank you very much. Max Spiegelberg, hello. If you could just jump on the call as well.
Hi there.
Hi there.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi. Yeah.
Sort of.
Part kind of comment really, but
frozen.
The question is, can you hear me?
Yes, now.
Yeah. The question is, okay, great. Can clients really expect agencies to reduce fees and deliver more when they face similar or same cost pressures themselves? Is that fair?
What? I'm not, yeah, I'm not sure about if they're saying they want agencies to reduce fees. It's about more for less. So that could be defined as the deliverables, for example, and it could be defined as the efficiencies in ways of working. So I wouldn't necessarily say that that automatically means a reduction in agency fees, because obviously we've got this budget, as Simon said, in terms of we're looking at the budget, what can we get for that, and it's working together in terms of how, and it could be things like ways of working, financial companies, and 20 rounds of sign off. Well, actually, if you got your act together, Mr. Client, years ago I worked for Waitrose and John Lewis, that Delia, there was an advert for Delia and Heston, and Delia kept putting a hand in and out this pancake ad, and it got to about 20 grand. We went to Fat Rose or whatever was the guy that won Waitrose. I said, do you know it's cost us 20 grand so far? Because you can't make your mind up about Delia's hand in or out this pancake thing. It's like, oh shit, okay, I'll stop. So I think it's not right to automatically assume it's fees. I think it's having that discussion to say, okay, you're in with that, this is the budget. What do you want us to look at? Is it resource, and therefore actually you want 5 hours of creative director at £200, that's going to affect that? Or is it about, if you've got your act together, or both of us, in terms of ways of working, or actually we can utilize technology, and by level of investment we can drive efficiencies? So I think it's having those conversations with clients that are coming to you with that, to say, you want this more for less, you want for efficiencies. There are various ways we can do it. I think agencies fall down automatically, they're coming after our fees, because actually it's having those discussions to say, okay, understand the situation you're in, which is my first point, understanding the situation clients are in. Retail's hard, everyone's got cost pressures, and everyone's got cost pressures. What can we do together? This is going to how things are going to affect. If you can't afford that, we can look at this, we can look at that. So that's what I would say, is don't automatically assume it's impact on fees. It's having that two-way conversation. Would you agree, Simon, from
Yeah,
what you
absolutely. I mean,
see?
there's a really perfect example, a live example we're working on at the moment. So we're in the process of producing sponsorship content for broadcast, and the creative agency will have done all of their workings, and they've come up with some really great stuff. The production agency has obviously come back and it's looked at it with their CGI team, and come back with an inordinate sum, and it's like, well, we can't afford that. So the challenge and the pushback to the agency is, you're going to have to simplify the creative. That means that it's more easier output for the production and CGI in order to bring the cost down. So that's where I see the cost benefits. So actually, if the two actually talk tighter and better, we can have a more efficient output of the creative and still have what we need. So that's absolutely right.
Brilliant. Thank you, Max. I've got I'm going to bring this one more question. I'm going to ask Sally Stevens to jump in on the call, if that's okay, and then there's one question I'll ask at the end, which is about pitch payment. Hi, Sally.
I'm very busy. You've spoken about critical relationship, that trust, that partnership, which, as you can tell by my line behind me, is incredibly important in my experience. But during that pitch process, during that onboarding process, how do you make sure that there is that chemistry there? Is that just hearing people talk and a bit of an intrinsic feeling, or is that more do we do some chemistry? Forgive me, put me English language. Do we do some exercises to work through what that looks like? How have you seen that work really well? Because one of the things that I've seen numerous times is the people in the pitch room are not the same people that you deal with on a day-to-day. So how does that?
Shall I take that one first? So the one thing I always ask for a pitch is, don't give us anyone that's not really going to be working on the account straight off. We want to know who would be the teams, who are the people. When you've been into big agencies, it often is they bring out the big guns, and then the moment that pitch is over, you've got a completely different team. That's an absolute no-no. Yes, you might have some support from some big guns, but you want the people you're going to work with. But ultimately, most people are decent and most people are nice, and you can get along with most people, and you can have a conversation socially or professionally. You will always know in some agencies whether it's going to work or not. And where I say that, there are agencies that are hugely arrogant about their stature and their position. If you're after an arrogant agency, then great, that's for you. From our context, we want honest, decent people, people that you would happily go out with as well as work together, and have those great relationships in order to develop. We want people that are not there just to pander to our needs, that would be really open and honest. And, we'll say to them, what do you think of our last campaign? And many of them will say, that is really good. We really like it. We think you should stick with it and we'd like to develop it. Or it could be, that's terrible, time to move on. So it's about being open and honest and frank. We're all grown up. And the reason why we're going out and asking opinions is because we want those opinions back. Chemistry just happens. Sometimes you'll get into an agency meeting and you'll think, this isn't right. Everything's weird, and they might have a different attitude, different people. You can't describe it, just happen. But you know that most times, the reality is, if there's 10 people in the room, there might be one person that doesn't quite work, but that doesn't matter. The majority rule.
Yeah, and I back at what Simon said. These days you do tend to get the A list. I mean, I think that, I think agencies have learned, but I'm with Simon. You want people on the account, that are going to work on the account, and that does tend to happen. Someone like myself with an intermediary role will help that as well. And I think sometimes clients can be quite polite about people, but as Simon said, chemistry. We're dealing with people that are experienced. Chemistry is always on a score sheet, after sort of creative strategy and chemistry, and commercials. That's the sort of four main areas. So I think these days, most clients are pretty good at doing it. I think sometimes probably maybe a bit too polite sometimes. I did a massive pitch 2 years ago, and there was just a rub with the person who was going to be leading it at a top 10 agency. So I, contacted, someone really senior at the agency. I said, look, if you're around, perhaps just be in the lift area when we arrive with the client. And it worked really well, and this person did, and actually it's worked out really, really well with him sort of overseeing it. And so sometimes if there's an intermediary involved, that can be our role as well, in terms of just, perhaps maybe just pushing it a bit and thinking, oh, actually, there's a bit of a rub there. Can we pick that up? Can we just make sure it's right? Because you want the right people. But I think most people involved in the pitch process are fairly grown. Most people are fairly grown up. And chemistry, it's life, as Simon said, isn't it? From 10 people, there's always one that would be a rub. It's what you do about that, and whether you want to call it. And again, it's public procurement process I'm doing. It's massive. It's, off what? It's a £75 million campaign over 5 years. And they haven't got a chemistry slot in their public procurement process, and I've made them add it in because it's such it's the biggest behavioural change campaign in 40 years. They need to make sure from the agency casting or the delivery body, which could be made up of 7 agencies, the casting is correct. So I've made them put that chemistry. So I'm a big fan of it. I also have commercial chemistry sessions where I sort of go through the numbers and that as well. So I'm with Simon. Most people know you do to get the A team, and it's always on a scoring sheet, and everyone's growing up and it's having those conversations if there's a bit of a rub.
Couple of top tips just to add to that. Always demonstrate to the client that you've fully been around their business and you've understood it. If you've got pictures and you've gone out and you've tested this and you've done that, always impressive. If you turn up and you've never even been to a store, that's an absolute no-no. The other thing that I always find really works, if you're seeing lots of agencies, do something that makes you stand out in that first introduction. I remember going to an agency years ago, and this is how long, 15 years ago, still remember it. The entire agency was decked in, when we went in, all the staff were wearing pajamas as part of their pitch process.
Brilliant.
It could be as small as you've got the entry reception, it's done up, welcome, such and such, you got your cupcakes. Do something that's different. And because not only does it demonstrate your creative thinking, but it also, when you're referring back, you're remembering, yeah, the agency that did this. Because you're not going to remember if you've been on 8 pitches and there's 10 people, 80 people's names, but you will remember the acts.
Brilliant.
Thank
We
you.
are. Thank you very much, and Sally, thank you very much. Josh, I will ask the question outside of this process because we actually haven't got time. I've got one last question, which is about both of you, Simon and Tina. If you were advising an agency to make 3 strategic changes to be competitive in 2026, what would it be and why?
Okay, first,
Yeah,
I
you
would
go.
say, yeah, embed commercial fluency. Know the client's numbers, know the pressure they're under, the market environment they're under. I mean, everyone could do, a Google alert, and it does shock me the number of agency teams aren't aware of the pressures, the environment that clients are working from. So embed commercial fluency is my top one. Understand the client numbers, the pressures, and the procurement language as well for those clients that have procurement, which is medium to large organisations. The second one I think is be tech enabled, but as I said, but human led. So, whilst, we're looking at AI and automation and efficiencies and the role of data and e-commerce being a focus is, it's there as enablers. But you can never replace human judgment, human creativity. So be tech enabled, but human led. And my third one is going back to the diversity thing earlier is invest in people. And it's hard, we're going to see the outcome of we're seeing it already. The WPP shake up with Cindy starting, the Omnicom, the big agencies, but invest in people and culture. I went to an agency the other day and it's great to see in the loo, their social club, bring a dog in or whatever. And, they had a pizza client and sort of stuff like that. So I think continuous learning, really, but have that diversity because I think I'm a huge fan of diverse talent because that will always differentiate you and make you a better agency for the client. So yeah, commercial fluency, be tech enabled, be human led, and invest in people and invest in your culture as well. My 3 things for next year.
Thank you.
We're 100% aligned on that. I add, and I'll keep it really simple because of time, AI upskill, so tech, as Tina said, commerciality, review costs, keep control and deliver value for money. Value for money is the key. And people in terms of speed, quality, efficiency and output. So yeah, same things.
Brilliant. Thank you. That is actually all we've got time for. I've got a minute left, so just to do my little spiel at the end. So Tina, Simon, thank you so much. A massive thank you. That was really, really interesting, enlightening, and actually I think it gave a lot of value to people on the call and actually people who watch this on YouTube later. As I said, I will be following up with some key takeaways later on, and there will be a YouTube video of this as well. If you want to keep in touch, do email me, and if there's any other questions, I'm sure ask me, and I'm sure that Tina or Simon will be happy to just respond when they can. Final couple of bits of housekeeping. So my dog just kicked me. Our 6 p.m. club, we've got a 6 p.m. club tomorrow in Manchester. That is being run by Tangerine Communications. They're great networking sessions. So if you're in Manchester area, please do go along. And then on Tuesday, the 7th of October, we've got the Festival of New Business taking place. And this is a real deep dive into everything new business. And it's taking a lot of the conversations that have just happened today and actually going into them in more detail, especially around the likes of AI. So we've got great speakers lined up. Please do in the chat, you'll see the link to it. Please do recommend that you do sign up, and I will look forward to seeing you there. Thank you very much, Tina, Simon. Again, that is the end of it's 12 o'clock. So I'm going to say thank you. Have a good day, everyone, and see you all soon. Thank you.